Hello, everyone, and welcome back to What's with the World. My name's Bella, and I'm your podcast host.
Before we get into everything, I just want to apologize. I did take 2 weeks off from making podcasts because I'm still in high school and things have just been really crazy lately, academic-wise, and I'm starting sports up again. So I just haven't really found time to make a quality podcast episode, and I don't just want to put out anything to put out something. So I'm here now. And right before the election, we're going to talk about the last two presidential debates, being the town hall debate and the final presidential debate of 2020. So we're going to unpack a lot of stuff this episode. It might run longer than the usual ones, but that's okay because we're going to get through everything in time for the election. So first we are going to start out with the town hall debates, and we are going to start off with Biden's town hall debate because his ran the longest. His was an hour and a half, while Trump's was an hour, so we're going to take the longest one first. Biden starts out with one of the citizens asking about COVID-19 and everything regarding coronavirus, his plans, his opinion on how the president handled it, and all of those things. So Biden says that in February is when people should have been kept in China, and that Trump denied it was a serious problem at first. We know this, we've heard this from other presidential debates. And what he adds on is that Trump was afraid that Americans would panic, and he didn't call for social distance immediately. He didn't want to worry the American people, so he kind of kept it hidden for a long time, which is obviously very dangerous, seeing how what we know now with the coronavirus being so deadly and being able to spread so quickly and easily. He also says that Biden has come up with a plan to reopen schools, and that Trump worries too much about the stock market and not worrying enough about the people. So basically, Trump is concerned too much with money and keeping the economy going, whereas Biden cares more about the health and well-being of the people. The people come first and not money, not the economy. So that's basically what Biden is saying. And he's also saying that Trump sent money from Congress to the wealthiest corporations and not to the schools and businesses that were intended to receive this money. The money that Congress has set aside for them, Trump took it and gave it to the wealthiest businesses to help them keep running and keep going during this pandemic. And because of this, a lot of small businesses have closed and people have become unemployed. So it's really, Biden is saying it's an unfair distribution of money and that Trump should have given it to the people who are struggling the most right now rather than just feeding into the wealthy people. Those are the main points that Biden had to say about the pandemic in general, but more specifically now talking about the vaccine and the question that one of the citizens posed about the vaccine, and Biden basically is saying that Trump is inaccurate with his timing about the vaccine. He doesn't actually know when it's going to be available and when we are going to have access and enough access for majority of people who want to get it. And Trump's basically just saying things, but he doesn't actually know when the vaccine will be put out and available. And Biden just kind of reinstates that he would take a vaccine from a scientist, but not Trump, because Trump told people to inject themselves with bleach, whether that was a joke or not. That's basically what Biden is saying, is that he trusts the scientists more so than he does Donald Trump, and that he predicts that by the beginning of spring we will have a vaccine and that everyone should have availability to it despite socioeconomic background, things like that, and that he said he might mandate its use. It depends on how things are going by that time, and by the time the vaccine is released, he might make it mandatory, but he obviously can't force you to take it. He just might enact a penalty if you don't take it. Talking about Trump's tax cuts and the economy, Biden says that he wants to eliminate Trump's tax cuts, and this is when top people, like the richest, the wealthiest, the people with the most money, richest corporations, they get a tax cut. So he wants to eliminate this, and he wants to go the opposite way, where instead of cutting the corporations and the wealthy people's taxes, he wants to raise them. So if you make over $400K a year, you will have raised taxes, and that money will go to healthcare and mortgages and helping student debt and tuition. And he also talks about how Wall Street, which is a credible source, a fairly moderate source, said that in 4 years, Biden's economic plan will create 7 million more jobs and grow the GDP by $1 trillion more than Trump's economic plan. So this is a big deal because a lot of people say that they support Trump because he's fixing the economy, he's making the economy better, but according to Wall Street, Biden's economic plan is actually more beneficial. And sort of again on opposite sides of the spectrum, Trump believes in investing money into wealthy people and wealthy corporations, giving them more money where it will trickle down to people who are more so in poverty or don't have as much money, whereas Biden believes that we need to work from the bottom to the top. So we need to invest more money into infrastructure, and we need to invest more money into poverty, creating new jobs, helping small businesses rather than wealthy corporations. And the next question was posed asking what Biden will do to win the votes of young black voters and how he will gain their support. And Biden starts out by saying that young black voters can change the outcome of the election and they hold so much power and influence that they need to get out there and vote. And then he goes into saying how he wants to change the criminal justice system. He wants to allow black people to generate wealth by creating programs for early education and increasing their funding. And he also wants to provide social workers and school psychologists. And he wants, again, going into the early education programs, he wants to create schools for 3 to 5 year olds that are not daycare but actually are schools and educational programs. And he says that this has been proven to increase the probability of completing high school. And he also says that for first time home buyers, he wants to make it a $15,000 down payment to kind of help them buy their own home, make things more affordable. And he wants to help small businesses and entrepreneurs start up by creating programs and just helping them, again, not helping the wealthier corporations first, but putting small businesses, the less wealthy, first. Moving on in regards to the crime bill, he says that he is against giving states more money to build prison systems, and he says that no one should go to jail for drug use, but instead that they should go straight to rehab. It shouldn't be a criminal offense, but rather they should be receiving the help that they need. And he says how he doesn't want black people to go to jail for longer time than white men for a same crime. So he wants to fix that because oftentimes black men and black women will go to jail for extensive periods of times for committing the same crime that a white man or woman would commit. And he says that he wants to create community policing, which would decrease which would decrease crime rates. So basically, not bringing these foreign police officers into communities where it's scary, they don't know anyone, maybe they're making bad judgment calls because they see everyone as a criminal and not actually knowing them without actually getting to know them. So he wants to create community policing where police officers are familiar with the people living in their area and the area that they're overlooking. They want them to be familiar with the people living there. So he wants to set up community groups with minorities and police where they can come up with a reform plan that needs to take place in order to improve the police system. So he wants to sit down minorities and police officers and basically come up with a comprehensive solution for the systemic racism that he believes is going on in America. He also, in turn, wants to create more police background checks, and he wants the police department to have psychologists and social workers to go with them on cases where there's maybe a mentally ill offender so they can try to talk them down before situations escalate and maybe things are taken out of hand. So he believes that a psychologist on the crime scene or on duty with the police officers would be very beneficial. And he wants to mandate the police department, meaning that he wants them to be totally transparent with the things going on. With regards to the Supreme Court, another question that was posed, he believes that the Constitution implies that people should have the right to determine who is in the court indirectly by first electing a president. So it's inappropriate for Donald Trump to elect a Supreme Court justice right before an election when Obama wasn't even able to do that. But he's really pushing for this to happen, and Biden believes that it's against the Constitution. It's a violation of the Constitution and the people's rights because the people should have the ability to elect a president and therefore indirectly elect a Supreme Court justice because, as we know, the president is the one who is able to choose the Supreme Court justices. And so he says that he's not a fan of packing the court, which is something that a lot of people say he's going to do, which he does imply that he might have to. if he's elected, in order to equal things out, because right now there's an overwhelming amount of Republicans in the Supreme Court and not enough Democrats to create a balanced system. And now about fracking, which is something that I think we were all confused, because Biden has previously said that he does want to ban fracking, but in one of the presidential debates he says that he doesn't want to and things like that. So in this town hall debate, he says that he does not want to ban fracking. He wants to put the message clear he is not going to ban it. He just wants to manage it in order to avoid earthquakes and harmful gases from being emitted. And in turn, he wants to invest in renewable, clean energy. And he supports the Recovery Act, which will bring down the cost of wind and solar energy. So basically, stop using coal and oil, which is harmful for the environment, and instead begin the use of renewable energy, which would be much better in regards to climate change and things like that. And it even says that by investing in renewable energy, we'll be able to create a lot of jobs from the clean and new infrastructure, and we could stop subsidizing oil and just basically overall help our environment, because in 8 to 10 years, these negative impacts that we are creating are going to be irreversible. And he says that he does not support the Green New Deal and that it provides no clean transition and that it's impossible to move that quickly. So he does not support it, but he does support more land preservation and investing in electrical vehicles in order to prevent an overwhelming amount of CO2 in the environment and the emission of harmful gases. And then, when asked about Trump's foreign policy, he says that we are less secure than we were in the beginning, and he's concerned about the amount of nuclear weapons that Iran and North Korea possess at the moment. And he says that we as a country are not very well trusted by the other countries globally. And in a survey actually taken by the world leaders, we are put behind Putin and Xi in the most trusted, basically meaning that Trump isn't a very trustworthy president and that others globally and worldwide don't have trust in him to be honest and basically upholding morals. And so Trump has no good foreign policy plan, is basically what Biden is saying. And then another question that was posed is how Biden will protect transgender rights and people who are transgender. And he says that he wants to change the discriminatory executive orders being put in place right now. So whether that be discriminating towards transgender people adopting or buying a home or being in the military, he wants to annihilate those executive orders in order to make things equal. And he says that transgender women of color are being murdered right now and that there should be no discrimination. So that's just an example he uses, is that there should be no discrimination in this country, no matter sexuality, whether you're part of LGBTQ community, your race, gender, anything like that. So now moving on to Trump's town hall debate, which ran an hour, like I said. So it was about half an hour shorter than Biden's. And it starts out with him talking about Corona. And he says that our cases have gone down while Europe's are going up. So in comparison to some other parts of the world, we are doing better. And he continuously blames China, calls it the Chinese plague, and that it's all China's fault. And that he said that these lockdowns that we're having right now cannot continue because they're harmful to the economy, they're harmful to people's mental health, and things like that. Those were the main points he gave on the coronavirus. We'll go back to that a little later when when another citizen poses a question regarding that. But the next thing was about white supremacy, and this is where he finally and clearly denounces that he does not support white supremacy. So there was some confusion of that with that in the first presidential debate, because he didn't really clearly denounce it. He kind of just said Proud Boys, which is a white supremacist group, stand back, stand by, which was a little concerning, but here he clearly denounced it. He does not support it. He does not think it's okay. And he also says how he believes the radical left is vicious and violent, and because of all these, especially these Black Lives Matter protests, he believes that they are unnecessarily aggressive, I suppose, is what he's trying to say here. And then somehow he shifts it to pedophilia, how he's against pedophilia, and he says that the only way he can lose is if this election is rigged. So basically, he says he will accept a peaceful transfer, but he also is not going to believe it if he loses. He's basically is saying, like, if he loses, the election is a scam, things like that. He's not believing in its credibility is basically what he's saying, unless he wins. And he says that people tamper with the ballots, the mail-in ballots, so that's why he's urging people to go in, vote in person, because he again says how he's seen ballots with his name on them being torn, ripped, found in the trash, things like that. So he's urging people to go vote in person despite the concerns with the pandemic. And now going back to the coronavirus and the travel ban and the measures he has taken, he says that he put a ban on China and Europe when the coronavirus first came into America. And he even put this travel ban on earlier than doctors and Nancy Pelosi had suggested. So he's giving himself a lot of credibility for shutting down the trade right there, because he potentially saved a lot of lives. And now, talking about the economy and how he plans to get it back on track, he says that with his plan, the GDP is going to go through the roof, and that's a direct quote, it's going to go through the roof, and that only 42% unemployment. So the economy is going to become phenomenal, basically, is what he said, is that we're going to lower unemployment rates, and that this economy that he has built pre-COVID has been the greatest that America has ever seen. Obviously, with the pandemic, things changed, but he says that pre-coronavirus, the economy was fantastic. He did an incredible job, and that he provided thousands of ventilators and things like that for the coronavirus when it hit. And in regards to mask wearing, he says that he is fine with masks, but he won't enforce it. He believes that that's the people's choice, and he's not. He kind of endorses it, like he says he's fine with it, like he wears a mask, but in my opinion, actions speak louder than words, and as we see in his rallies where there's thousands of people not wearing masks, it's just a little strange how things are contradicting there. But he believes in people's freedom of choice and things like that, so he's not going to enforce mask wearing. Now, talking about the Affordable Care Act, aka Obamacare, he says that he got rid of the individual mandate that went along with Obamacare, which was, in his opinion, the worst part of it, was that basically if you weren't getting health insurance, if you didn't get that, then you had to pay a tax penalty. And so he said that he got rid of that. And he says that he, in time, wants to terminate and replace Obamacare, but that is also what he said when he was first running for president, and he has yet to do that. So we'll see where that goes. But he says that he always wants to protect people who have pre-existing conditions, and he wants a less expensive health care, even less expensive than Obamacare. And then he goes on to talk about corporate tax and his tax and the whole scandal going on with that. But I'm not really going to get into that because it's basically very repetitive of what he has said in previous debates. So yeah. But in regards to the Supreme Court now, he is saying that it is, with the whole controversy with whether he has the power to, or if he should rather, because it is in his constitutional right to elect a new Supreme Court justice because he is still in his 4-year term, but is it morally right for him to? That's what is on the topic of debate right now. And he says that it is in his 4-year right to elect a justice, and that he does not care if Amy Coney Barrett, the now Supreme Court justice, rules for or against him. He just wants what's best, and he praises Amy and says that she's very well qualified. And in regards to Roe v. Wade, aka the Supreme Court case that legalized abortion, he says that states could decide whether it's okay for a woman to get an abortion or not, and he would like a justice to make the decision, but he won't give his opinion on abortion. He doesn't want to influence the Supreme Court. He says that it's more their decision to decide if it's okay or not. And in regards to policing and community and minority discrimination, he says that Democrats don't support enforcing law enforcement, and he says that he has done the most for African American communities besides Abe Lincoln, which is a very bold statement, and you can decide if you agree with that or not. And then when talking about immigrants, he talks about the Dreamers program, aka DACA, and he says that how he strengthened that, and but also he wants to build a strong wall along the southern border, aka the border that's separating us from Mexico, or the U.S. from Mexico. And he says that Mexico has easily been infected by the coronavirus, and he therefore wants to keep America separated from them. And he says that people must come legally. He doesn't want any more illegal immigrants crossing the border, and he doesn't want any more people pouring into the country because they're taking jobs, everything like that. Things we've heard before, basically. And then he also talks about how he has the vaccine coming up and how he's built the strongest economy again. Um, just kind of reiterates that. And yeah, so those are the main points for the town hall debates. And now for talking about the last presidential debate of 2020. So, the first topic that was talked about during this debate was the coronavirus, and Trump was given the floor first, and he says that 2.2 million people were expected to die, but he closed the economy in order to fight it, and he again blames China, and he says that the mortality rate is down by 85%, which is a big accomplishment, and he says that the vaccine has been announced and that the military is distributing the vaccine or is going to distribute the vaccine. And Biden responds by saying that 200,000 Americans are dead, which is just unacceptable, and that there are thousands of deaths still a day, and that there are 70,000 new cases in the US alone a day, and that the expectation is that 200,000 more people will die by the end of the year, and that he basically says that the president, Donald Trump, has no plan still, and that these people are dying and becoming sick, and Donald Trump is doing nothing about it. And he encourages people to wear a mask, and that they are trying to get rapid testing. And Trump responds by saying that he has no guarantee of the vaccine, but that companies such as Johnson and Johnson are working hard on it, and that 100 million vials of the vaccine are going to be approved. And Biden responds by saying that we have to make sure that the vaccine is totally transparent, and that Trump hasn't been transparent, and that he has no clear plan. Trump again responds by saying that he wants to open the country, and that he and others have a much more comprehensive understanding of the disease so they can take more safety precautions while still keeping the country open. And he basically says that we can't lock ourselves up anymore, and since we've learned so much, we can start reopening things, and that 99.9% of people recover who are diagnosed with the coronavirus, and that it's something that we are going to have to learn to live with. And Biden says that it's not something that people are learning to live with, it's something that people are learning to die with. And Trump says that he takes full responsibility, but then he also continuously blames China. So a little bit of contradicting ideas there, because he says that he does take full responsibility for the coronavirus, but then he completely blames China. And Biden says that Trump has told people not to worry, but Trump thinks we are in control when in reality we aren't. Coronavirus is still a very prominent issue that we are not handling very well. And Trump's final response is that Biden says that the borders shouldn't have been closed and that trade shouldn't have been closed because it was xenophobic. But in closing those borders and trade, Trump saved thousands of lives. More specifically, talking about the strategies about handling COVID, Biden says that there is a way to shut down the virus without shutting down the country, and that Trump should have been negotiating with Nancy Pelosi and making a plan and securing money for this plan, but instead he's been off doing other things, not really taking it seriously. And he says that if he becomes president, he is not going to rule out not going to rule out quarantines or anything like that, but he does think that there is a way to open safely, and that Trump has refused to support money for schools. Instead, he is supporting it for things like wealthy corporations, which is something we talked about previously.
And then Trump goes on to say how we must open schools and it's safe for us to open schools because younger people aren't as affected by COVID and that they'll be fine, and that the transmission from student to teacher or teacher to student is very low. It's a low risk thing that he thinks is worth taking the risk for in order to open schools, and that he believes we should open the country to save people from abuse, drugs, depression, everything like that. And Biden says that we need to safely open and we need to give resources such as plexiglass and that people need to continue to social distance. And in response to this proposal, Trump says that plexiglass is expensive and therefore unrealistic to have plexiglass in restaurants and schools because it's just a very expensive thing. And now on the topic of national security, Biden says that any country that interferes in the election will pay, and that Russia and China have been involved in this election, and now Iran is starting to be involved, and that interfering with the American sovereignty is just unacceptable, and that's what they're doing by interfering with the election, and that Trump has not addressed Putin and his involvement in the 2016 and potentially the 2020 election. And in response to this, Trump says that Biden got $3.5 million from Russia, and that Trump has never taken money from Russia, and that nobody is tougher on Russia and Putin than Trump is. And Biden, in response to this, says that he has never taken money from any foreign source ever, and that Trump is the one who has a secret bank account in China, and that, unlike Trump, Biden has released all of his tax returns, which is something that Trump has failed to do. And Trump's response to this is that he does not make money from China, Russia, or Ukraine, but Joe does, and that the IRS treats him horribly, and that's why he has been unable to release his taxes. And in the discussion about foreign entanglements, Biden says that Trump tried to bribe the Ukrainian government, to say something negative about Joe Biden, but they declined the offer, and that he has never, again, he says that he's never taken money from China, only Trump has. And Trump says, Trump brings in Biden's son, which is interesting. He's not really talking about Biden anymore. He's talking about how Biden's son has taken $183,000 monthly from Ukraine. And he also says that he does not deny his Chinese bank account that he opened in 2013, but he shortly closed it after in 2015. And in talking about, now talking about healthcare, as we know, the candidates have very differing views. On one side, Biden wants to build off of Obamacare and make it stronger, whereas Trump wants to abolish it as a whole and replace it with something new and better. And something that they can agree on, though, is that they both want to protect people with pre-existing conditions, and they want healthcare to be affordable and accessible. Something else that they have, they're on opposite sides of the spectrum, is on minimum wage. Biden believes in raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour, whereas Trump said that the minimum wage should be a state option, and that states should come up with what they want their minimum wage to be rather than the government enforcing it on them. And Biden believes that raising this minimum wage, it has been proven to help businesses rather than hurt them, and that it can in turn bail out small businesses. As of right now, 1 in 6 small businesses are shutting down and going under because they can't afford to stay afloat. Whereas Trump says that raising wages will not help businesses, but it will force people to close their businesses. It will make things worse. And still going off of this theme of like being on very opposite sides of the spectrum, as we know, both candidates have extremely different views on immigration, and that was kind of brought up during this debate. Trump was saying how children who are quote unquote separated from their family at the border aren't actually separated from their family because they are brought to America by bad people, aka coyotes, the people who try to sneak them in, and that they can't separate them from their families if their families weren't the people to bring them here in the first place. And so he's saying we have a stronger border than ever, and Biden says that these kids did come with parents, and that there are over 500 kids right now who don't know where their parents are and they've been separated from their families, and that Trump is doing nothing about it, but rather denying that this is a problem.
And this kind of makes us the laughing stock of the country because it makes us seem as though we have no morals. And Trump's response is that these kids are being taken very well care of. And Biden's kind of saying, like, how is that possible when they don't have their family and they don't have their parents? How could they be living their best life? And so Biden says that he wants to create a pathway for citizenship for 11 million immigrants to come into the country legally. He wants to fix the immigration system and give DACA kids a path to live in America legally, and that 200,000 immigrants as of right now are first responders, so we really do owe it to them to fix this immigration system and to make life better for them. Now on to race in America. Biden very clearly addresses that there is a racial issue and there is racial tension in America. There's a lot of racial discrimination, and it's not a matter of, you know, how much money you make or anything like that. You're always going to be judged based off the color in your skin, basically, is what he's saying, and that there is prominent institutional racism in America, and that we must provide better education, healthcare, and economy for colored people because right now they are at a disadvantage in this country, and he wants to make them free from violence. Trump says that he has done the most for Black community since Abraham Lincoln. When discussing climate change, Trump again goes back to what he has done, and he says that because of the things that he's done in his 4 years as president, we have the lowest number of carbon emissions that we've had in 35 years. And Biden says that global warming is still an existential threat to humanity, and that in 8 to 10 years we will be at the point of no return, and that the environmental and labor organizations support his plan because it creates new jobs in addition to obviously helping the environment. And he says that he wants to create 50,000 charging stations so that way we can own the electric car market in order to lower the emission of harmful gases and things that could potentially be detrimental to our environment. Trump's response is that he does not support the Green New Deal, and that AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Congresswoman, knows nothing about climate change, and that Biden supports the Green New Deal, which he has already made clear Biden does not support the Green New Deal. And in response, Biden says that his plan has been endorsed by major environmental and labor unions, and this makes his plan seem more credible, right? Because it's being supported by these people, these professionals who know what they're doing, and their whole job is to protect the environment. And Trump's response is that he knows more about the wind than Biden. And he says that he loves solar energy, but it's just not powerful enough. And in response, Biden says that he kind of reiterates the idea that, again, he does not want to ban fracking, but there should be no fracking on federal land. And in regulation for toxic facilities, Trump says that he saved the oil businesses when it was crashing because of COVID, and in response, Biden says that people live on fence lines where chemical and oil plantations are potentially very harmful to the people living there and their health. And if he were to become president, he would stop giving federal subsidies to oil companies. So those were all the major points that I took away from the town hall debate and the last presidential debate of 2020. But I highly encourage you to watch them if you haven't already. My points may not be what you find significant, but they're what I found significant, and some of the major topics that I found were important and that other news networks were highlighting. So yeah, and again, I just want to thank you guys for bearing with me and being patient as I took a 2-week break to kind of focus on school. Things just got really hectic over the past 2 weeks. But yes, hopefully I will be back next week with a new episode, and thank you again. Bye.